What is up, guys? Well, we have made it to the end of yet another month of 2024. This year is just peeling off of the calendar. And now we're here to talk about every new release film that I saw in the month of June 2024, of which I was able to check out 8 new releases. The only one that I missed that I had somewhat of an intention to check out was I saw the TV Glow. Just ran out of time, and so we're going to sit here and talk about the 8 that I did manage to carve out the time for. And just looking at this list, this was a crazy interesting month of movies, just wildly different genres. Even looking at how I rank them is just difficult because they all do very different things well, very different things wrong. And this, maybe of any month this year, if you ask me tomorrow, quite a few of these might shift places a little bit, but nonetheless, a pretty solid month of movies. But something's got to be in last place, and this month, the really only movie that I would say I disliked quite a bit is The Watchers. And this was the directorial debut of Ishana Shyamalan, who is the daughter of M. Night Shyamalan. And this was a movie that I didn't know anything about. I walked into it blind. I didn't know the plot. All I knew was that M. Night Shyamalan's daughter is directing it and that Dakota Fanning starred in it. I probably saw the trailer at some point, but most times in theaters, I'm looking down at my phone while the trailers are playing because I just get sick of seeing the same things played over and over again. Nonetheless, what this movie had going for it was that you can tell that Ashana does have a good eye as a director. You know, there was some interesting shot choices. I did like the fact they went on location into these woods. Visually, atmospherically, there is some interesting things built here. It does build a lot of intrigue. The premise itself was very intriguing in the first act of the film, and you start to realize what this movie is going to be, where this girl just happens to fall into these woods and gets lost and comes across this bunker in the middle of nowhere with a group of people that are saying, hey, these creatures watch us at night. You have to sit in here. If you go outside, you're going to die, and they're only here to study you. So as long as you follow the set of rules, you'll be able to live. You just can't leave. And so it is very much a classic Shyamalan type story. And at the same time, that's also kind of the movie's biggest downfall. It's that it has one of the biggest strengths of her father, which is just building intrigue and giving a really interesting premise that hooks you, while having damn near every single flaw of his worst films, which is just a plot that, as it goes on, starts to really meander. A lot of just illogical, nonsensical plot holes and questions and things not adding up, and things that just are weird when you stop to think about them for more than 2 seconds, and the movie desperately does not want you to stop and think about it. And ultimately, by the end, the more answers that you're given, the more reveals that are given about what is going on, the less interesting it became for me. It was an ambitious movie trying to blend some horror with some outdoorsy thrills and some Irish folklore. And so kudos for an ambitious first project, but it just didn't really come together for me. And by the end of it, I couldn't shake the feeling that even though her father is supposedly only a producer on this film, it felt like he had a lot more hand in this movie than they're letting on. So I was disappointed by this one. I'm curious to see what she's going to do next, but this one wasn't the best, run out of the gate. Coming in at number 7 is probably my most disappointing movie this month, and that is The Bikeriders. And this is the movie that, surprisingly, I've gotten the most pushback in the comments from people that really did not understand where I was coming from in my review, which was interesting. So this is a film that is based off of a true story. It's based off of a book, like a collage of pictures and everything. Essentially, this guy was following around this real-life motorcycle club back in the late 60s, early 70s, and eventually wrote a book on everything that happened in the 5-6 years of the rise and fall of this club. And that's what this movie is about. It's a retelling of all of that. It's an adaptation of that book. And the movie is advertised as being this very intense, thrilling crime thriller type deal, where very much in the vein of like Sons of Anarchy or Goodfellas, or a crime family, where things start off innocent enough, we're just going to hang out, and then the more they get into it and the deeper everybody gets, the worse things go, and people start dying and buildings get set on fire. That's the type of movie that I was in for, and that's the type of movie that I love. And I really liked all of the performers that were here too, where you got Tom Hardy, who's one of my favorites, Austin Butler, who I think has been great so far, Jodie Comer, who took me a minute to remember where I recognized her for, but she was very good here. But the issue with the movie is that it's not about any of that at all. It's really about what motorcycle clubs were before all of that stuff started to take over, before crime and drugs and all of that started to kind of be synonymous with motorcycle clubs. And that's interesting enough. That's fine. But the way that they portray it in this movie, it's kind of boring. There's no other way to get around it. It's just a movie where you have a bunch of guys that love motorcycles, that love this club, that are hanging out and doing motorcycle club stuff. And, you get a couple of sequences here and there where you get a little bit of that crime thriller thrown in there, but they're few and far between. And to me, that was the biggest disappointment with the movie. I don't know if I walked in knowing that was absolutely not going to be the point of this film, if it would have improved it so much more for me, because I still feel like just the basic story that they're telling here is not all that interesting. The characters, despite being good performances, the characters are pretty one note. The characters are pretty paper thin. And the overall story is just a lot of meandering events, just motorcycle club members hanging out and doing bonfires and partying. And it's all told through the perspective of the wife. So it's all got kind of this cynical edge to it where she really doesn't, glamorize a lot of it. And so, interesting enough, I see why some people would like it for sure. And I said that in my review. I understand, the type of movie fan that would really like this and enjoy it. But for me, I just didn't find the story or the characters to be interesting enough to tell the less interesting version of a motorcycle club movie. So it was good. It's well made, but I just can't see myself ever watching it again. Coming in at number 6 is the most complicated entry on this list. And that's going to be Horizon: An American Saga, Chapter 1. This is the first of a planned 4-part Western epic by Kevin Costner. And when I walked into this film, I had only known about the 2 parts because we got the second part coming out in August. But apparently there's 2 more films that he's either just started production on or plans to start production on. And he's supposedly going to see it through. So even if this movie, which it seems likely is not going to make a whole lot of money, that doesn't matter. You're going to get all 4 of them. So that's a bit of a relief. But, it's interesting because I'm somebody who I have not watched a whole lot of Westerns, especially the super old ones. Most of my experience with Westerns are ones from at least the 90s and the 2000s, onward. But this is Kevin Costner's passion project, his love letter to what is literally a dying form of movie making. This is kind of an homage to classic Western cinema, to classic old Hollywood cinema. And what makes this so complicated is that so much about this movie I champion, and so much about it I really want to uplift. Kevin Costner walking away from, I believe, the most successful TV show on TV at the time, Yellowstone, to go and do this passion project that he really wants to do, and doing a 4-part 3-hour each Western epic, which is not the type of film that is absolutely going to, blow up the blockbusters or anything like that. It's not going to blow up the box office. And doing it because he wants to preserve that type of movie making, and he wants to do it. Like, that's something I want to high five him for. And that's something I wanted to support, which is why I wanted to see it. It's something that I want to encourage everybody to go and support. But then you have the other side of it where I watched this film and it's very well made. It's very well shot. The landscape and cinematography and everything is gorgeous. The performances are all really good. There is certainly enough investment built so far in the first 3 hours that I would want to continue on. But it's a 3-hour film that feels like 5 different first acts of 5 different movies or TV shows. You have a bunch of different groups of people out in the American westward expansion during the Civil War era. And the movie just focuses on these different groups periodically throughout 3 hours. And like, it's an hour plus into the film before you're even introduced to Kevin Costner, who is, I would assume, the main character of the film. He's on the poster. And so while each of these individual groups and storylines have their elements of intrigue and their elements of getting you invested in them, it does feel a bit cumbersome, and it feels a bit scattershot, where even just the way that they cut back and forth from these storylines sometimes is kind of jarring, because there's just so much going on. There's so many characters. There's so many different, completely segregated groups of people that even by the end of the first 3 hours, there's nothing in sight as far as these characters actually intersecting. Like it's literally first act stuff. And so it's a very taxing experience. It's a very taxing 3 hours to ask most people to give, even a massive movie fan like myself. It's like watching the first 6 or 7 episodes of a TV series and still not quite getting the vibe or where things are going and not really being hooked yet. You know, we all have those TV shows that people recommend to us where they're like, you got to watch like 3 seasons and then it starts to get really good. And some people are willing to go on that journey, and some people are like, 3 seasons? I gotta dedicate that amount of time before it hooks me? I don't know, man. That's kind of what this is like. So I don't see this movie working for most people. I don't see this movie hooking most people, and I don't see most people appreciating the theatrical experience of this because it is such a long, slow, taxing experience. You know, cinephiles, old school Western fans, like there's people that I could see really sending this up and getting on Twitter and shaming everybody that has anything negative to say about it. And I'm just sitting there, like I said, very complicated, where I absolutely want this to succeed. I want Kevin Costner and other people like him to be able to do shit like this and put it out in theaters for us to see with no fucks given about it making $500 million or not. That's awesome, and I want to preserve that. But I can't lie to you and say that I was like captivated for 3 hours, or I would walk right into part 2 if part 2 is out in theaters right now. I was exhausted. And so, it's a movie that you kind of have to know who you are. And as much as I champion the theatrical experience, and I think it's beautiful and it's nice to see on the big screen, I also think the nature of the story is going to make this a story, especially after it's all said and done and we have all 4 pieces. But even just now, if you're going to watch the first chapter of it, it's a experience I think most people would prefer to have at home. So very complicated pick here at number 6. Coming in at number 5, we've got A Quiet Place Day One. And this was one of my most anticipated films of the year because I really like this franchise. I really enjoyed the previous 2 films, and I actually preferred the second film by a razor's edge. So far, this was on like an upward trajectory. And I was really intrigued about what they were going to do here. Taking a little commercial break in the middle of this, what I assume will be a trilogy in this family of A Quiet Place, and going back and telling a side story back in day one, the day of the invasion. And so I was really excited for this one. And I ended up liking it. I do think that most people that like the Quiet Place movies will really enjoy this one. Some people will like aspects of it more than the previous 2. Some people will think it's easily the weakest of the 3. I belong to that camp, but I did really like it. I like the characters here. I think the performances are good by Lupita Nyong'o and by Joseph Quinn. There's a really simple human approach to their storyline that for some people on paper, the story is going to be very underwhelming. But for me, there was something about it that really was touching, where essentially, if you want to write the plot down on paper, it's 2 strangers meet up in an apocalypse and decide to go and get pizza. And that's not a joke. That's literally the plot of the majority of this film. Lupita Nyong'o wants a slice of pizza from this pizza parlor that is in her Harlem town that she grew up in. And before they escape New York and move on to uncertain fates of whatever this new version of reality is going to be post-apocalypse, she wants to basically take a bite out of her childhood one last time. And there was something about that just really moved me, where I started to, for like a 5 seconds or so, I was like, is this really the plot of this movie? Are you fucking kidding me? And then as soon as it started to sink in, I was like, that's actually really profound. Because if the world was ending, if there was a ticking clock out there, those are the types of things that I actually would grasp for. I'd be like, I want to have this food one last time. I want to watch this movie one last time. I want to hear this album one last time before everything shuts off and maybe we never get it back again. And so there was something about that I just found really interesting and satisfying on such a simple way. So I appreciated that about it a lot. There's some really thrilling sequences here as in the previous 2 films. I don't think they're quite as thrilling as the previous 2, but they're up there. One in an underwater tunnel specifically was a really good scene. The biggest disappointment for me And keep in mind, I'm still saying this is a good movie and I recommend it. And I look forward to even seeing more side chapters in this universe down the line. I think that they've got carte blanche as far as that goes. The biggest disappointment for me was that I don't understand the point creatively of going back to day one if we're not going to recontextualize or give some more information about either the invasion or these creatures or how humanity learned to survive these creatures. And they just don't give us any of that. They don't give us any new information. Everything that we knew, which is not very much from the escapades of the first two films and what that family was able to figure out, we don't learn anything else by the end of this film. And so that was a big disappointment for me. That alone, if they would have done something really interesting there, would have put this at least half a star higher for me. And so they would have ended up being like, maybe number 2 on this list. That was something that I really wanted from this movie. I'm not somebody that has to have everything spelled out. I'm not somebody that needs to have every question answered. That's actually one of the reasons why I dislike prequels more times than not. It's because they try to answer too much, and I don't like the answers that they give. But you got to give me something. Just something. You know what I mean? Even if it was just showing how the humans trial and error figured out that they have to be quiet, that they hunt through sound. Like, even just that probably would have been enough for me, but we don't get any of that. Lupita Nyong'o wakes up and the world just understands. That's what we got to do. We got to be quiet. Shh. So I didn't really understand the point of that, and that was a bummer for me, but I still like the movie overall. I still recommend it, and I enjoyed it. Want to see some more Quiet Place films for sure, but A Quiet Place Part 3 sooner than later. Coming in at number 4 was the last movie that I watched on this list, and that was Hitman, which is a movie that I have been hearing about for months. My buddy Sean Chandler's been talking it up and hyping it up because he's been hearing all this hype and chatter. He eventually got to see it, I believe, at its premiere in Austin, and was pretty praiseworthy towards it. So I was very curious about this one. Just it got away from me until a couple of days ago. So this is Glenn Powell, who is kind of the current rising male star in Hollywood, really. And it's a Netflix film, and it's directed by Richard Linklater, who a lot of us know a lot of his movies, Dazed and Confused, School of Rock, things like that. And essentially it's telling a somewhat supposedly true story about a guy who moonlights working for the local police, where he uses makeup and costumes and like his acting skills basically to pose as a hitman to entrap people. You know, if you're online on Craigslist or whatever looking for a hitman and it says meet me at Huddle House and we'll discuss the terms, he's the guy that meets you at Huddle House, and then as soon as you give him the money you get busted for soliciting murder. So it's a movie about a guy that does that for a living and all the different costumes and personalities that he creates to do that. And really, this was just a giant showcase for the talent of Glenn Powell, because every single one of these characters that he creates for this hitman are so unique and so different that it's almost just like a greatest hits of everything that he can do. So that was really impressive and really fun. And eventually in the movie, one of the clients that he's supposed to bust is this fine-ass chick that wants to kill her abusive husband. And rather than follow through with it, he kind of hints at her to get out and starts dating her using the hitman personality that he was entrapping her with. So that's kind of the plot of the movie. It's like a romantic, dark comedy. And I just thought it was really fun. It was a really interesting movie that was very enjoyable, and the different places that it went, I had a really good time with it. The missed opportunity for me was that I wish it was funnier. For me to fully recommend it as like this dark comedy, I wish I laughed more. It wasn't really a laugh out loud type of film. It was just kind of like a smirk, smile, and enjoy, feel good type movie. So if it had been a little funnier, this would have easily been number 1 this month because it's just such a unique movie. But I did really enjoy it. So if you're like me and you were kind of putting Hitman just on the watch list and haven't gotten to it yet, I recommend it. It's pretty fun, so check it out. Coming in at number 3 is going to be Bad Boys Ride or Die, the 4th film in the Bad Boys franchise, and this was just my type of film. If you guys have been watching me for any amount of time, I know I talk horror more times than not, but most days of the week, action is actually my favorite genre. My 2 favorite films of all time, Die Hard and Terminator 2, are action films, so I really enjoy what the Bad Boys films deliver. I've enjoyed every single one of them. I've seen every single one of them in theaters, and I was looking forward to seeing what they could do, given that the previous film, Bad Boys for Life, was actually my favorite of the three, surprisingly. It's still surprising to me. And this was the same creative team coming back. And I did really enjoy this film, but it is my least favorite of the four. So take that for what you will. I think that a lot of the action is still really solid. The way that these two directors are very cool at innovating, ways to use the camera in new ways. Like they had like this little swivel dolly attached to a gun to give you like a POV switch during the gun shootouts and everything with Will Smith and Martin Lawrence, which was really cool. The comedy was the biggest kind of iffy spot for me. There's a lot of really good comedy that hits. There's a lot of comedy that I felt was kind of almost borderline cringy and just didn't work for me whatsoever. And that's the one element that knocked it down to number 4 in my ranking of Bad Boys films. And there were certain elements too that I don't know if they could have avoided. Like they have to recast Martin Lawrence's wife. Supposedly she's the actress is going through some kind of an illness, which I found out after saying that in my review. So that sucks, but it is incredibly jarring when you watch the movie and the same actress who's been this woman for 3 movies all of a sudden now is somebody different, and she's more integral to the plot in this one than the other 3 combined. So that was a little jarring for me. I don't even know if I said this in my review, but having Will Smith, having Mike Lowry get married and feeling like we don't get to know his wife at all. She's just like this dispensable character that is only there for a plot reason in the third act felt strange, and why he didn't marry I forget her name, but the lead chick, the captain now, who he kind of had this on again, off again thing that was expressed a lot in the third film. That felt strange to me, unless they have plans to revisit that in part 5. So they're just little things like franchise fan nerd things that bothered me about this one. But overall, it was a really good time. And Reggie stole the fucking show. Like Reggie's responsible almost for an entire star of this film. So I had a good time with it. It seems most people that like the Bad Boys films had a really good time with it, and it comes in at number 3. Coming in at number 2, we've got Inside Out 2. And despite the fact that I'm kind of the grumpy old man at this point that doesn't really like animated films, I guess I shouldn't say I don't like animated films. I just don't get excited about animated films. They just don't really get me pumped. Even things like Toy Story that I love, or, even the Ninja Turtles cartoon, which I love. Like, I don't know, I just don't get excited about them. I don't really rewatch them much. So being that this is an animated film that come up to number 2, that shows you how good this movie was. I really enjoyed the first Inside Out years ago, took my family to see it. Haven't rewatched it since I saw it in theaters. But the second one I thought was just as good, maybe even better. I think that it touches on some really profound things. I think it's what top tier Pixar movies do, where they have this very inherently kind of fun, silly premise and visualization of something that keeps the kids engaged, but there's also more adult themes kind of being expressed through the storyline and through some of the themes and through some of the commentary that it's going through that kind of gives even more mature audience members something to chew on. Those are what the best Pixar movies do. And this, to me, really captured that very well, where you have the introduction of these new personalities that come with puberty, and you have like anxiety, which is kind of the star of the show, and showing like a visual interworking of how emotions and anxiety and embarrassment and everything work together, just like in the first film, where it's just a very creative and profound way to visualize that in a cartoon that adults and everybody can relate to, because you're like, oh yeah, that's exactly how my brain works. So it was a fun movie. It was a cute movie. It was funny. And it's, I think, the first movie this year that cracked $1 billion. So I wouldn't be surprised if we get an Inside Out 3 at some point. I really enjoyed it. My family really enjoyed it. And as soon as it's available to have a VOD or on Disney Plus, I guess more likely, I'm sure we'll end up watching it again very soon. But number 1 this month came out of absolutely nowhere. Less so for me, because I did have this movie on my radar, but for everybody else, it's just like, what is this? And it's a film called What You Wish For. And this is a movie that actually premiered at Fantastic Fest last year, but I was not able to check it out. I had it on my to-do list for 2 different screenings, but the first one, I think it was conflicting with something that I wanted to see more, so I dropped it. And then the second time, I got locked out of it because the tickets got bought out. So it's a movie, maybe one of 2 movies last year that I really wanted to see and just didn't get a chance to. And it dropped on VOD very early in June. And so I checked this out last week while I was on vacation in the mountains, and it is a really wicked movie. And the difficult part is that I really want to sell you on checking this thing out, but I can't tell you much about it because it's a movie that's best experienced walking in as blind as possible. All I will tell you is all that I knew, is that you have Nick Stahl, who a lot of us know infamously as the John Connor in Terminator 3, but a lot of other things that he did much better in early on in the 90s. So it's the first thing I've seen him in quite a while. You have Nick Stahl, who is this struggling chef that goes to visit a friend of his who is a much more successful chef that makes ass loads of money cooking for the elites of the world. And through a series of events, he has to take over for his friend for this meal. And shit goes fucking crazy. And so I don't even really want to tell you, like people are going to compare it immediately to the menu, and that's maybe 5% accurate just because it has to do with a chef and, you know, some horror stuff. But I really don't want to tell you much else. But what I loved about this film, especially walking into it blind, is that it genuinely sends you for quite a few loops. It sends you for quite a few surprises where you're just like, oh, fuck, okay, that's what we're doing? Whoa, all right. It's so good at slowly building this creep factor and this tension and creating this scenario where you really invest yourself in wanting to see how the fuck this main character is going to navigate this and how he is going to get through this. And it's got some really interesting commentary on like the elites of the world and what it takes to, what some people have to do to succeed and what some people have to do to kind of get their thrills. And, you know, when you've experienced everything, what is there left to experience and things like that. So I've already said too much, but this is a movie that I really enjoyed. I look forward to checking it out again. I hope it gets a Blu-ray release, but I rented it. I'll probably end up buying it actually on Amazon Prime. I think it was like $6 to rent. So if you like movies that aren't necessarily the movies that are on everybody's radar, you want to have a little twisted surprise every once in a while, please check this out, because to me, this was the best experience that I had with the movie of June 2024. Well, that's it for this one, guys. If you enjoyed that, please click over here for all of my 2024 new release reviews so far. And I'm also going to put my ranking of the Bad Boys films up here if you're a fan of my number 3 on this list. Please check all that out. Like, share, hit the subscribe button so you don't miss everything in the future. And as always, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean you have to be.